Welcome. We're going to be talking about Interrater reliability, which is a way of describing the agreement between two or more raters. So if you have two people who are coding the same set of data, what is the agreement between those two individuals? Or what is the agreement between a whole team as you are starting to code your data? So kappa is what's used. This is a type of correlation coefficient, and it can be used in a really lovely way. Use Cohen's kappa. This can be very simple. This is when two coders are going through and coding the data. It can be really simple if it's straightforward and there are not many codes, but it can get harder, especially when you have more than two coders. So this is the Fleiss kappa, or with the topic is really more complex and there are a lot of codes. So as we're kind of thinking about this, there are a couple of different ways to do inter-rater reliability. Percent agreement is another one that we're going to talk about, but inter-rater reliability will allow us to include chance in this whole component. So when we're talking about like how easy or hard something is, like you can imagine like if you're talking about two states, like did someone die or not die, like that is a pretty easy coding where you'll probably get that generally together. A more nuanced code example is, we were looking at HPV vaccination refusal for one of our studies, and we were having a student kind of go through and like read through the transcripts for some of these initial code sets. And so they were talking about, here are a couple of different ways that they were thinking about where, their children may not be sexually active. So they were talking about how does not being ready to have a conversation about having a vaccine versus that this might lead to promiscuity if the child gets the vaccine. So thinking about these different things, like those are very different things. And please know that those codes were refined and other things ended up happening related to that. But as you're kind of thinking about this, you can imagine that individuals are going to code these different excerpts differently. And so as you think about, there are a couple of different ways that you could do this. So you can imagine, like, here are Mark and Susan. So there's a paper from McHugh, which is beautiful. It describes exactly this. And so this is coming from that paper. But if you have Mark and Susan, you can imagine that there's going to be an agreement between those two individuals. And so here, their percent agreement is 80%. So that means that there's about 20% that might be erroneous or a little bit different because there's disagreement. When there's more than two coders, you can see the percent agreement across those individuals. And one of the things that you'll start to see is that, well, where are some of these unlike responses actually occurring? And it's not necessarily that, so for example, Mark over here, everyone rated it a certain way with the exception of Mark, whereas same thing with Susan, everyone rated it a different way with the exception of Susan. So it's not necessarily that, you'll get to see if is there one rater who might need some additional training? Is there a certain set of codes that might be very, very confusing, like that might have lower inter-rater reliability or lower percent agreement? Again, those terms are different, but they kind of talk about the same thing. So if we're thinking about percent agreement, the way that you could think about it is, well, what are the normal ratings that get appropriately applied and the appropriate abnormal ones that get appropriate applied over all of the ones that are available. So that is one way of doing it, for example. As you start thinking about inter-rater reliability, moving from percent agreement to kappa, all that they're doing is they're taking into account what the actual observed agreement is and then minus that chance agreement. So if you're thinking about it, you could pull it as here's your 0.94 over minus your chance agreement. So we're not going to ask you to do inter-rater reliability for your projects. However, in case you needed to know how to calculate this, the chance agreement is simply calculated by pulling your column marginals, your row marginals, and these components together over your total sum for your study. That will give you a kappa value, and that gives you a general level of agreement that you can describe. So ultimately, you're trying to get above 0.8 is the goal, and that is considered a strong level of agreement. So often we will say that, we will try to get above 0.8 for all of our codes, and we will continue to have group discussion until we're above 0.8 for all of that. Not everyone does inter-rater reliability, but you should know that what it is, so in case you need to apply it to your studies. Please know that software programs are can calculate kappa for you. This is easiest when the codes are pretty simple and you don't have a ton of nested variables within them. So at this high level, it can be really easy for doing that. Enjoy.